everyone. I will talk about the new Brunswick Avenue Pre-Contact Site. So this site has undergone phase 1, 2, and 3 archaeological excavation work, and a total of 724 artifacts were collected. While it is a small site assemblage, I plan to show how such a small site can speak volumes about the people who have lived there. Now, the woodland period, as seen in New Jersey, is characterized by these sedentary settlements in these riverine settings, the diversification of pottery styles, and horticulture with plants such as knotweed, squash, or sunflower, along with maize, which were part of this diverse subsistence diet. So Meadowood cultural materials are typically identified in early woodland contexts. The Meadowood cultural tradition, first described by William Ritchie, is considered an archaeological manifestation in New York and the broader Great Lakes region. While originally known for its highly ritualized secondary cremation burials, the cultural tradition also has an intensified use of certain materials like Onondaga chert. While larger settlement sites are known in western New York and in the Niagara Escarpment, smaller sites are found outside the area due to the extensive long-distance trade and the symbolic importance of the projectile points and blades. In New Jersey, most of the sites with Meadowood occupations consisted of ephemeral campsites based on tool maintenance and resource procurement. So a Phase 1B archaeological survey was conducted by Grubb and Associates in July of 2021, where the new Brunswick Avenue Pre-Contact Site was identified along with 3 historic sites. 2 consecutive STPs had yielded pre-contact material, including a chert biface fragment and a chert fragment. So phase 2 fieldwork was then completed by May of 2022, consisting of additional shovel test pits and excavation units. About 179 pre-contact items and 3 historic artifacts were recovered, including a Meadowood-like blade, but no other indications of this Meadowood cultural tradition. So as avoidance was not feasible, a phase 3 data recovery occurred in September of that year. The site measures 1,766 square feet, and the excavations covered a 12% sample. The excavation units were 5-foot squares, and after removal of the A and AP horizon as a natural layer, the subsoil was excavated in 0.25-foot arbitrary levels until we reached the sea horizon. One feature was encountered at 1.4 feet below the datum, which was interpreted as a probable hearth based on charcoal and the results of the macrobotanical analysis. Wood charcoal was collected and sent for radiocarbon dating. Additionally, soil samples were taken for a loss on ignition analysis, and a geomorphological assessment was conducted on site. With all the data being collected, what questions can we ask? Our investigations during the data recovery had focused on these 6 research questions. Now, to make these questions simpler, not just for the audience, but for me and the presentation's time limit, I have condensed those questions down to 4 questions. Just what is the setting of the site? What were they doing here? How did the materials get there? And what is the broader context? So how did we answer this first question? What is the setting of the site? The site is on a knoll overlooking wetlands which are associated with a small tributary within the greater Raritan River Basin. Geomorphological assessment of the site had concluded that the soils are alluvial and were deposited roughly 6,000 to 4,000 years ago, at least initially. This then initial occupation was then covered by alluvium following the early woodland period, and then it was then reoccupied. Speaking about these time periods, the radiocarbon date from the feature had placed the site in a transition period of the middle to late woodland period. While that date matches the Levanna projectile point that was also found on site, it does not match the early woodland Meadowood point. So the fact that the geomorphology had identified the possibility of 2 occupational occurrences and examining the vertical clustering of the assemblage opens the possibility that the site actually had 2 distinct occupations. Additionally, about 72% of the assemblage was found in these two adjacent units, showing that there is a limited area of cultural material deposition. Only one of those occupations had the probable hearth. The paleobotanist Justine McKnight had processed a soil sample from the first feature and conducted the macrobotanical analysis. Chestnut and hickory were likely used for fuel. 2 huckleberry seed fragments were found, and these are usually harvested fresh during the summertime. So now that we have a general idea of the setting, what activities were happening at this location? To answer this question, we turn to the cultural materials we identified from the excavation work. So we had conducted analyses on the stone materials and a small use-wear analysis. So overall, activities for tool rejuvenation, comprising resharpening and reshaping, are most prevalent in the assemblage. Onondaga chert from secondary fluvial and glacial contexts are the primary material being used, along with other cobbles that can be found nearby. The toolkit included bifaces, a Meadowood blade, a Levanna point, a notch scraper, and utilized flakes. So about 38% of the assemblage had exhibited heat altering. Pot lids and pock scarring on many flakes suggest unintentional heating or purposely being deposited into a fire after napping. Intentional heat treatment will change the physical properties of the chert, which can make it easier to nap, but not so much that it would damage or spoil the material. The material may have been heated for a long duration offsite or within the one fire pit feature that was present. As most of the artifacts in Knappring debris was located within a smaller portion of the site, we can hypothesize that napping occurred in place, or given the fewer fittings available among the lithics and groundstone fragments, it may have been cleaned up and deposited where they were eventually recovered. So about 15 lithic tools or tool fragments are present in the assemblage, consisting of 4 points and fragments, 1 notch scraper, 3 biface fragments, and 8 potentially utilized flakes. All tool fragments or utilized flakes were examined for microwear and hafting traces using a portable microscope. Impact fractures and breakage patterns were examined to determine if the pieces were used as knives, points, or other functions. So the biface fragment and the bifacial edge fragments likely fractured during manufacture or through the retouching of the bifacial edge. The utilized flakes show these sort of inferior wear, likely indicating a short life use history. Additionally, some hacking traces were identified here on the left. Fracture patterns at the tip of the Levanna photo on the right are consistent with use as a projectile. So we see that there's a little picture beginning to form of what this site was like. We have 2 occupations, there's some napping, and a little bit of food processing. So how did material actually make it to the spot? What is the wider geographical connections beyond this site? For this section, we compared the different raw materials present in the collection with hand samples of known toolstone quarries and the literature descriptions. Most of the raw material identified resembled the bedrock formations from New York or northwestern Pennsylvania. However, glacial till deposits containing cobbles of those material types can be found in the northern reaches of New Jersey. Additionally, a few pieces contain cortex. So of the cortical pieces represented, most indicated a smooth cobble surface, which is caused by physical weathering processes, indicating the material came from these secondary deposits such as stream beds and glacial outwash. Thus, while most of the chert was identified as locally available, approximately about 53% of the assemblage likely originated as these Onondaga chert cobbles. Onondaga chert can be found in cobble form throughout New Jersey in these Pleistocene secondary fluvial deposits in central New Jersey, or found in these glacially transported deposits within northern New Jersey. A small amount of Norman scale chert was also recovered. So this site does not exist within a vacuum, and we know that they had distant connections to the north and took advantage of the local resources nearby. So how does this small site connect with other woodland period villages and campsites? So prior cultural surveys within the drainage close to the site, along with knowledge from the avocational archaeologist Larry Randolph, had identified pre-contact sites dating from the Archaic into the Late Woodland time periods. Many of those were small sites with flakes and tools recovered, but remain as an unidentified site type. At least two sites date between the Late Archaic and Early Woodland, and both of those were campsites with potential reoccupation. Thus, the potential Early Woodland occupation area site would fit chronologically with these nearby sites. But how does a potential Meadowood occupation fit in? Some possibilities suggest long-distance interactions and trade. Another suggests that those materials got intertwined with local early woodland cultures, usually associated with fishtail or orient, which are also contemporaneous with Meadowood. Either way, the drainage may have been an area for gathering resources before moving to the next location or back to the main drainage systems. Additionally, the Munsee-speaking Delaware groups living in northern New Jersey and other Algonquin-speaking peoples in the area likely interacted with the Haudenosaunee-speaking groups who inhabited New York State and central Pennsylvania. So it is possible, as prior studies had shown that a trade network existed up and down the Delaware during the Archaic, that those connections still existed into the woodland period. So to summarize, the site had yielded 724 artifacts, with lithic debitage comprising most of the assemblage. The artifacts and specialized analyses reveal the presence of a multi-component occupation. The Meadowood blade and the frequency of Onondaga in the assemblage may suggest that the first occupation was during the early woodland, and then the feature, the radiocarbon date, and the Levanna point suggest that the second occupation occurred between the middle to late woodland. Stone tool resharpening and reshaping, including some bifacial thinning, was the dominant napping activity over a short period of time. While the encampment was small, it provides a glimpse into the history of the area around the site and the larger New Jersey Piedmont region. Now, as every archaeological project is a team effort, many things are owed to the people who conducted the specialized analyses, the RGA staff who had worked on this project, and to the client who had sponsored this work. So thank you, and thank you to the audience for watching.